Don't go to the wedding, run now. The message lit up just as I was tying a blue ribbon around my daughter's wedding gift. A pair of diamond earrings worth $15,000. A gift meant to say what her mother never had time to say in this life. I smiled, thinking someone must have texted the wrong number. But when I called back, a rough voice came on. Harold, your own daughter is preparing papers to declare you incompetent. I froze like I just heard a death sentence. 10 years after my wife passed, I thought I had at least one person left to trust. I stayed silent for a long time. In the mirror, I saw an old man, hands trembling, as he held a gift box, but in his eyes flickered the light of someone who once built an empire out of rubble. I set the Tiffany box on the table, picked up the phone, and said quietly, "If they plan to bury me at this wedding, then they're about to attend a different funeral. If you're still here, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Every comment helps this story reach more hearts. And if it moved, you give it a like so others can find it too." My name is Harold Benton, 70 years old, born and raised in Oregon. My whole life smells like cement, hot steel, and job sites up and down the West Coast. I founded Benton Aggregates and Concrete with 2 calloused hands in an old truck. 10 years ago, my wife Barbara died of cancer, leaving a hole only our only daughter Fiona could fill. I thought I knew that kid better than anyone. Smart, strong, sometimes stubborn, just like her mother. I used to believe everything I did, every brick I laid, was to leave her a solid future. But that night, staring at that cold text, I realized maybe I'd built an empire on sand. I walked out of the Tiffany & Comber store in downtown Portland, gripping the small bag like I was holding a piece of my own heart. On Morrison Avenue, the late afternoon sun shattered across the wet pavement. Every step felt heavy, like I was stepping through the years I'd sacrificed for my daughter. Cold nights working late Christmases, with just the 2 of us eating cheap pizza by the fireplace. I opened the message again. No mistake. Don't go to the wedding, run now. An unknown number. Not in my contacts. No photo. I slipped out of the stream of people and stood by the corner of a Starbucks, my fingers shaking with anger and confusion. A second text popped up. Don't go home today? Trust me? A chill ran down my spine. Part of me wanted to brush it off as a cruel prank, but the instincts of a man who has run hundreds of projects said otherwise. The most unreasonable warnings are sometimes the true ones. I called back, but the line just rang. No one picked up. I stood there for a long time watching people pass between the mall entrances. In my head, I drew a risk map like I used to do at the company. Scenarios, hazards, exit routes. By the time my coffee went cold, I decided not going home. I turned toward the Sentinel Hotel where I used to stay for construction industry conferences. The old building with red tile roofing and frosted windows reflected the Portland sunset. I asked for a room under initials H. Benton. No trail. In a standard room with a brown carpet and the smell of damp wood, I sat down and opened my phone. I reviewed my call log. 3 missed calls from Fiona this week. 2 texts from Travis, her fiancé, asking, "Are you feeling better? And did Dr. Ellison call you back?" I remembered clearly I had never met any doctor named Ellison. I dug through my email. In the inbox, a string of invites, senior health assessment, special retirement insurance request to sign durable care authorization, all from companies I'd never registered with. At the same time, Fiona and Travis had shown particular interest in my memory status. I leaned back and closed my eyes. For 10 years, I've dealt with the loneliness of being a widower hour with one belief. Fiona is still that little girl I taught to drive, taught to mix cement. The one who said, "I'll carry on your work, Dad." Thinking my own kid might stand with a stranger to strip me of my dignity felt like someone just pulled the rebar out of the foundation I poured myself. I opened my laptop and created a new document. If worst case happens, bank accounts and passwords, company assets, and beneficiaries' info for my old attorney, Randall Knox, who they may have approached secondary accounts transfer control immediately if something breaks. I wrote like an engineer drafting an emergency plan for a structure about to fail. As I wrote, shards of memory came flooding in. Last week, Fiona called to ask, "Dad, do you remember renewing your life insurance?" Travis casually asked, "Does the company still hold shares in the Salem project, or were they transferred?" And at our most recent dinner, both of them said the same line. "We just want you to rest." I used to think that was caring. Now I understand it was a blueprint for a scheme. I grabbed an old engineer's notebook, the one that helped me manage hundreds of workers and tons of concrete to assess my own memory. I wrote out each day, each contract, each number, no gaps. I remembered everything. I was fully lucid. Outside, a misty rain started tapping on the window pane. I turned on the desk lamp and looked at my collude hands. The hands that built Benton aggregates and concrete out of a dusty garage 15 years ago. Now that very company was being threatened by the person I love most. I picked up my phone and set an alarm for 11:50 p.m. That's when I'd call that unknown number back, or anyone who knew something. If what they said was true, I'd know what to do. If it was a prank, I'd see how far they'd push it. I opened the drawer, took out the old Parker pen my wife gave me, and wrote a final line in the notebook. No one can declare me incompetent. Not while I still remember the person who taught me to pour my first foundation and the person now trying to bring it down. I closed the notebook and set it next to the phone. The hotel's warm light washed across the wall, throwing a long shadow of me solid like a steel column in a trembling structure. I shut my eyes and listened to the clock. Each tick was a warning. I had once thought my life would end with music at my daughter's wedding, but maybe it would start over with a phone call at midnight. The phone rang at exactly 11:50 p.m. Sharp and cold, like a knife slicing the Portland night. I jumped up from the chair, heart pounding, that familiar line flashing in my mind. "Don't go home today." An unfamiliar number showed no name, no location. I hesitated for a second, then hit, except Harold, a hoarse voice, said, breathless, like he'd just run through cold air, "It's me, Victor Hale." I froze. It had been 8 years since that name was spoken in the Benton Aggregates office. Victor used to be my closest friend, a former partner co-founder. We split bitterly after he lost everything to gambling, and I had to buy out his shares to save the company. Last I heard, he left the state without a trace. "Victor, you're still alive?" I asked softly. Surprised and wary. "Alive and clearer than you think." "I heard your name today, Attorney Randall Knox's office." He paused for a few seconds as if weighing every word. "Listen, Harold, I don't have time for small talk. They're discussing guardianship proceedings after your daughter's wedding." I leaned against the table, feeling like the hotel floor had tilted. "Guardianship? What are you talking about?" "I heard every word, Harold. Fiona and her soon-to-be husband, that guy Travis talked about, how to transfer control of assets if the court confirms you lack capacity. They mentioned Dr. Ellison, who will evaluate your memory, and Randall Knox, your old attorney, is preparing the paperwork." The room thickened, like it was out of air. I flicked on the lamp and reached for a pen and notebook. "Slow down," I said. Every detail, every name, Victor went on, voice dropping to a near whisper. "They said you've been forgetting things lately, misplacing keys, leaving bills unpaid. Enough evidence for a psychological basis." I heard them say that, Harold. Those exact words. I wrote it all down, pressing so hard the pen nearly tore the paper. Randall Knox, Dr. Ellison. Guardianship. Lost keys. A whole scheme inked in black on white. "Where did you hear this?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "I was there for my aunt's estate. Knox's office is still on the same floor as your old one. I was in the waiting area when I heard them talk about a wealthy, elderly patient When Fiona said your name, there was no mistake. And why are you calling now? Because I had to be sure. And because I still owe you. If it weren't for you, back then I wouldn't have survived that winter. Meet me tomorrow morning, 8C0 at the Hawthorne Bridge, overlooking the Willamette. Bring every critical document and don't tell anyone, especially Fiona. His voice caught, then faded into a faint static. I held the phone for a long time until the screen went black. The room slipped back into silence, just rain against the window and the soft breath of the AC. I walked to the window. Portland's yellow lights shimmered on the river. Car lines sliding by like blood flowing under the skin of night. I've always known this city's rhythm horns job sites, early breakfast with strong black coffee, and contract lists as long as a highway. But tonight was different. Everything felt like it was watching me. I felt hunted in my own life. I steadied myself. Don't panic, Harold. That's what they want. I've handled bigger crises than this. The difference is that now the collapsing structure is my own home. I dragged a small suitcase to the bed. One by one, I packed documents. Old will, original, with Barbara's signature. Company share agreements, notarized in 2015. Bank documents and transaction authorizations. A USB with financial data. The one thing Fiona doesn't know exists. I labeled each envelope and numbered them like I was prepping a final inspection binder. When I shut the case, I noticed my hands were shaking. Not from fear, but because my trust had had its bracing ripped out, leaving only a rusty shell of hard experience. I glanced at the wall clock. The minute hand crawled 12:48. No turning back. I had to verify this, but I knew. If I told Fiona, every trace of evidence would vanish. She could fake concern cry, convince me Victor made it up, and I might cave. No, I wouldn't say a word. I'd stay silent, observe, and gather proof. I poured a glass of water and sat down. My mind began to reframe the logic of everything like re-erecting steel around a cracked frame. If Victor's right, I have two threats, Randall Knox and Dr. Ellison. If he's wrong, I still have time to apologize to my daughter, and it's a misunderstanding. If they're further along, then I think I need to prep a legal counterattack with hard evidence. I split the plan in two. Plan A, public defense. Meet an independent attorney store. Evidence lock accounts back up all company data. Plan B, quiet counter. Collect recordings, emails, texts, anything to prove the asset grab scheme. I've never been one to trust gut feelings. But this time every cell in my body said Victor wasn't lying. I pulled out my old leather project log where I recorded our major builds. On a clean page I wrote Incident Fiona and Travis 6/24. Under it, source Victor Hale, warning, sham guardianship, Randall Knox, Dr. Ellison, action, don't leave the hotel, prep for Hawthorne Bridge meetup. I put the Parker pen down and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. It had been years since I felt this alone. When Barbara was alive, she could lower my voice and make me believe the world was still warm. Now the room held only rain-fluorescent buzz, and an old man relearning how to fight not with concrete and steel, but with his own blood. I set another alarm labeled with 2 words Bridge 8. Before I turned off the light, I added one last line. Survival rule. Silence, observe, record, collect evidence. I closed the notebook and set it on my chest. Outside, the rain thickened. Each drop on the window reminded me that time was moving, and that starting tonight I was no longer a father prepping for a wedding, but a man preparing for the final fight of his life. At first light, Portland wore a thin veil of fog like dust over the Willamette. I got up early, brewed a strong black coffee from the hotel packet, and watched the first rays pierce the frosted glass. I'd slept under 2 hours. Victor's voice kept looping between the rain and my heartbeat. I left the hotel at 7:40, driving slowly through damp streets. The city was unusually quiet, just a few runners and breakfast joints opening early. When I reached the Hawthorne Bridge, Victor was already there, hands in his coat pockets, gray at the temples, thinner than before. He didn't smile. We didn't shake hands, we just nodded. After 8 years, friends, then enemies, what was left were two men who'd both been skinned by life at least once. "You made it." Victor's voice was rough from cigarettes. "I didn't want to drag you into this, but they're moving faster than you think." I stayed quiet and let him talk. "Yesterday afternoon, I went back to Knox's office to pick up estate documents. I heard them, Fiona and that Travis guy in the conference room with Knox. They were deciding when to file the guardianship petition." Victor pulled a crumpled note from his pocket. Planned filing date 2 days after the wedding. Reason: patient exhibited confusion in public with witnesses. I crushed the paper in my fist. In public meaning what they planned to stage a confusion episode at the reception. Victor said slowly. Knox said, "There will be plenty of witnesses, and his reaction will be enough for evidence." I stared at the bright silver river under the bridge. A cold rose from my feet to my throat. It all came into focus. The pitying looks from relatives, the questions about my memory, the times Fiona said I forgot to turn off the stove when she was the one cooking. Every small detail clicked together like shards of glass, glittering but cutting. "You sure?" I asked. Victor nodded, eyes steady. "I heard it myself," she said clearly. "We need him to show disorientation in front of everyone so the court will believe it." The river wine carried damp air and a whiff of rust from the railing. I felt like I was standing on a bridge between two worlds. Years of love on one side, a betrayal you can't return from on the other. I pulled a small notebook from my jacket, opened to a fresh page, and wrote down Victor's words verbatim. Old habit document, every detail. Each line was a nail driven into the blueprint of my own life. "Anything else?" I asked. Victor nodded again and pulled another note from his inner pocket. "Here's the clinic address for Dr. Ellison, the one who will evaluate your cognition. They booked it for Tuesday morning, 2 days after the wedding. I checked Ellison works there. He's known to be flexible with special files." I looked at the note. Victor's handwriting, a bit shaky but clear. "Ellison Cognitive Center, 9 a.m. Tuesday." "Thank you," I said, my voice rough. "Whatever debt was between us, call it even. This time you saved me from the worst collapse of my life." Victor gave a thin smile and stared into the distance. "You once pulled me out of debt, Harold. I'm just paying a piece back. But be careful. Don't let them know you suspect anything." He turned and walked toward the parking lot. I stayed on the bridge, wind slipping through my coat, sunlight skating on the water. I didn't feel anger, just a low, steady ache, like steel being bent slowly through a roller. Back at the hotel, I poured another coffee and opened the laptop. My project instincts kicked in. I lined up the timeline. Last Monday, Fiona called about life insurance. Wednesday. Travis stopped by the office, accidentally looked at share agreements. Friday, they came for dinner. Fiona reminded me I often forget to turn off the stove. Weekend, a string of emails about senior insurance and long-term care, each dot connected into a solid line, and I saw their manipulation pattern as clearly as a structural drawing. Every word, every action, calculated to shape me as slipping. I scrolled my contacts, my sister in Seattle, a cousin in Denver, and nieces in California. I remembered how in the past few months, each of them had asked, "Do you still remember me?" Or, "How's your health feeling, Foggy?" Phrases that seemed caring but came from the same script. They had been seeding the image of an old man fading. I shut the laptop, inhaled, then opened my document bag. Contracts, titles, company accounts, pieces of a life I built over 40 years. I scanned every page, saved to 3 separate folders with encryption. One copy to a secure cloud, one to a USB one, sent to an old attorney friend in Eugene with a short note. If you don't hear from me in 3 days, open the Harbor folder. Instructions inside. H. When I hit send, I leaned back and closed my eyes. The laptop's blue glow washed my face, adding years to the skin, but inside something hardened like freshly tempered steel. I told myself, don't get angry. Anger only makes you lose focus. Be exact like measuring a wall's tilt. Every move needs a solid basis. I pulled out my phone and set an appointment with Randall Knox's office, using the reason update the will and review old papers. The secretary's voice on the other end was gentle. Thursday, 10th a.m. Does that work? I said, perfect. When I hung up, I checked the clock close to 11 a.m. Daylight poured into the room, shining on the suitcase still open. Inside, the folders were lined up like an army ready for battle. I poured more coffee, sat at the desk, and opened my notebook. On the last page, I wrote one short, plain line. They want me incompetent. I'll show them what a lucid man looks like. I closed the notebook. The coffee cooled steam fading like the thin fog beyond the window. In the glass reflection, I saw a man past 70. Silver hair, sunken eyes, but the gaze still sharp as the day he laid the company's first brick. No doubt about it, they'd planned this carefully. But they forgot one thing. What I've built all my life isn't just concrete projects. It's the survival instinct of a man who's used to reading every crack before it turns into collapse. I shut the laptop and put everything back in place. Outside church bells rang out noon across the city. I stood, grabbed my coat, and got ready for the next meeting. This was no longer a father-child conversation. This was an exam of memory and of my final clarity. On Thursday morning, Portland's sky was murky gray, a light rain falling like steel dust hanging in the air. I drove to Randall Knox's office on the 6th floor of an old glass building downtown. The faded sign still read, Knox, an Associates Family and Estate Law. I've walked into this place dozens of times, but today, every step felt heavy, like the floor might be rigged. Inside, I met the familiar blonde secretary, same professional smile, but a quick flicker of caution in her eyes. The way people look at a patient rather than a client. Maybe Fiona had already planted the seed. Here. I'm here to see Mr. Knox. I said, keeping my voice even. I want to talk about updating my will and reorienting company ownership. She nodded and led me in. Randall Knox glanced up from his desk, neatly trimmed gray hair, eyes half friendly, half probing. Harold, long time. I thought you'd fully retired. I took a few months off, but the company's still running. I said, keeping it light. I'm here to ask a few things about the future succession. Guardianship, the usual admin stuff. Knox chuckled and nudged his glasses up the bridge of his nose. Guardianship? Huh? Protecting assets for someone? Or you want paperwork ready in case your health dips? I tilted my head, fining thought. You know my age. Lately, I've heard some talk about lack of capacity proceedings. I just want to understand the process in case someone in the family needs help later. Knox gave a thin smile, but I caught his eyes narrow just for a second. The reflex of a man hearing something he's been hiding get named. It's actually straightforward, he said, standing to pull a template packet from the shelf. This is the standard process under Oregon law. You just need a medical conclusion and a family member to file. I nodded, eyes scanning the papers he laid on the desk. The header petition for guardianship conservatorship fields, for the physician's name, the petitioner, the date for a cognitive exam. In the notes section, I caught a faint red ink line. Expedite if agitation occurs after the reception confirm witnesses. I inhaled, kept steady, and pretended I hadn't seen it. I might want to review more closely, I said, like a man casually discussing an investment. Could you give me a photocopy of this template? I'd like to go over it. Knox hesitated. We don't usually hand these out, but fine a copy for you. It's just a blank template. I pulled out my wallet and said a few. The bills on the desk. I want to pay for your time. He gave a polite smile and nodded. Not necessary, Harold. Consider it paying for an old friend's time, I said, keeping the warmth in my tone. The secretary brought out the freshly copied packet, neatly wrapped in a cardboard cover. I took it, thanked them, then shifted the topic to baseball to throw him off. Knox jumped right in talking about the Yankees-Mariners game last week and Julio Rodriguez's home run. I nodded, smiled, and played the part of the harmless old man who doesn't care about legal details. Leaving the office, I kept a calm face, even said hello to the lobby guard like usual. But once the car door closed, my hands started to tremble. I set the file on the passenger seat, pulled out my phone, and snapped photos page by page. I numbered every image, sorted them, and saved them to a separate drive folder. Old engineer habit. Let no detail slip. Midway through page 3, a handwritten note read, Psych Evaluation. Dr. Ellison, Portland, Memory Clinic. Contact Travis Cole, no doubt left. They'd scripted it all. I shut the file, leaned back, and stared through the windshield. A light rain slid down, in streaks blurring people walking under umbrellas. I thought of Barbara, my late wife, who used to say, build as many houses as you want, just keep one real home for our kid. I held it with my whole life. Now that home was exactly where they wanted to lock me up. I opened my contacts and scrolled to Maya Rudd, a private investigator who'd helped my company on a labor fraud case years ago. Her voice was still husky. Clipped, Mr. Benton, long time. What can I do? I need you to run 2 people, I said steady. One is Travis Cole. The other is Dr. Ellison at Portland Memory Clinic. I want to know any financial, legal, or professional complaint issues as soon as possible. Do you have a deadline, Mr. Benton? I need it today. Got it, Maya said. I'll call before noon. I hung up, started the car, and drove to a lot by the river. Once parked, I opened the laptop and logged into online banking. Since Fiona started helping me manage expenses, I'd given her secondary access. Seeing Fiona B. authorized on the screen sent a chill through me. I called my bank rep. He's been a customer of my company for years. Hi, this is Harold Benton. I want to temporarily lock all secondary transaction authority and enable alerts on any transfer over $5,000. Yes, Mr. Benton, we can do that right now, but we'll need your security code. I read it off, confirmed, then heard her say, done. Any unusual activity will alert your phone directly. Good. And don't notify anyone else about this change. I ended the call. Outside, the rain had thinned, and a dim sunlight slipped through the gray. The clock read 11:47 a.m. I reopened my phone and waited for Mia's update. At 5 to 12, the phone buzzed. Mr. Benton, Mia said, crisp as a briefing. I've got a few things. Go ahead. First, Travis Cole. I pulled his credit file. He has an unpaid gambling debt of nearly $120,000 tied to a poker room in Salem. Also, 2 months ago, he pawned his Lexus to cover the venue deposit for the wedding. I clenched the wheel until my knuckles went white. What about Dr. Ellison? This one's more interesting. He's been complained about 3 times for misrepresenting patient records and capacity evaluations. One case was dropped when a witness recanted. The other 2 were marked insufficient evidence. However, I found a flag in the Medical Association's internal database. He's under renewed review for a recent case also tied to cognitive assessments of an elderly person with significant assets. I closed my eyes and breathed in. The pieces locked together. Travis needs money, Ellison needs easy files, and Fiona holds both. Thanks, Maya. Send everything to my secure email. I'll wire the rest after. Understood, Mr. Benton? And be careful. I don't think this is only about money. The call ended. I leaned back, staring out. In my head, the logic lines had turned into a clear grid. No doubt I had my first proof. I took out my small notebook and wrote in bold blue ink, Travis debt, $120,000. Ellison under investigation. Knox internal node expedite after reception. 3 points, 1 axis. The rain started again. Light. I started the engine and checked the clock. The minute hand crept like my own heartbeat. From here on, every step had to be measured down to the last inch. Like testing the load on an old bridge about to face one final trial by fire. I said it under my breath. Low and firm. They want to make me the incompetent man. Then let's see how much an old man's memory can pull this curtain down. 2 days later, I went back to the Cedar House at the end of Maple Street, the one that used to be full of Barbara's laughter and the smell of Sunday apple pie. Today it was strangely quiet, just wine whispering through the maples on the porch and gravel crunching under my shoes. I held the key ring paused a beat at the door, then deliberately set it on the porch table, right where Fiona would see it when she got home. A small act, but enough for them to believe the old man was truly starting to forget. I opened the door. Warm light spilled from the living room. Fiona sat on the sofa head bent over her phone, while Travis wore headphones tapping at his laptop. At the door, they both looked up, flashing quick smiles, the kind people give a neighbor after gossiping about him. Dad's back. Fiona stood, her voice sweeter than usual. Are you tired, Dad? Lately you've been forgetting your keys a lot. I glanced at the keys still on the table in feigned surprise. Oh, really? I thought they were in my jacket pocket. I patted my chest and gave a sheepish smile. Travis shot a sideways look at his wife, then slid in with a light voice and that fake concern. I've noticed you've been forgetting more, sir. Maybe after the wedding we should have you get your memory checked for peace of mind, right, honey? Fiona nodded, squeezing his hand for show. Yes, Dr. Ellison has a great clinic, Dad. I already made you an appointment next Tuesday. I hid a smile behind a vague nod. The moment I heard Ellison's name, I knew I'd caught them in their own net. Inside my jacket, the phone recorder was already running quiet enough only I knew. Ellison? I asked, keeping my voice naive. Which doctor is that? I don't remember meeting anyone by that name. Fiona chuckled softly. That pitying tone I've heard when she spoke to nursing home patients. You forgot I told you the other day. He specializes in cognitive assessments. It's just a light checkup, don't worry. Uh-huh. I stretched the sound, easing into a chair. And you said after the wedding. Where's the wedding again? I forgot. Travis answered, still feather-light. At Willamette Lakeside Pavilion, Dad. You don't have to worry. Just show up and relax. We've got all the paperwork and costs covered. I nodded, then pretended to remember something. Speaking of, isn't the Benton Aggregates contract with Salem about to expire? Travis, did you talk to the buyer over there yet? He flinched just a fraction, but that was enough for me. He adjusted his posture and forced a smile. Yes? A friend of mine is interested in investing. Nothing serious. Your friend, I said, playing the dunce. Uh-huh. Your friend in the concrete business too? Not exactly, he said, eyes flicking at Fiona, but he has financial experience. I didn't press, just smiled and turned my teacup. In my head, I logged every word. The room settled for a moment. Then Fiona sat beside me and took my hand. Dad, Travis and I have talked. After the wedding, we want you to really rest. There's a great senior community in Arizona. Sunny year-round pool nurses on duty. You won't have to worry about anything. I gave a small laugh, just enough to make them think I was touched. Senior home, huh? Sounds fancy? Maybe I should go. It's cold here. That's right, Dad. She cooed. It's warm and cozy. Lots of people your age. You just relax. I stood and strolled toward the kitchen, talking as I pretended to look for a kettle. You might be right. Let me make some tea. Something hot to warm up. They smiled and turned back to their quiet talk. I turned on the tap. The water's gurgle hid the room noise. I tilted the phone in my pocket so the mic faced out. Their voices carried back just enough. See, Fiona whispered. He's got no clear awareness anymore. Keeps talking about the company, then forgets. Tuesday. Ellison just needs to sign off. Yeah, as long as he doesn't suspect, Travis said. A few witnesses saying he forgets and the court will buy it. My heart pinched, not from pain, but from the realization. Everything Victor said was dead on. All those years raising her, and it came down to one line. He's got no clear awareness. I don't know about you, but to me that's not a sentence anyone should ever hear from their own child. How did you feel hearing that? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know if you felt the same. I waited a few more minutes, then came back with a steaming tray. Tea's here. Warm up. I let the tray wobble a little, spilling a few drops. One more detail to sell the clumsy old man. Fiona hurried over. Let me do it, Dad. Smiled and wiped the table with a napkin. Sorry, I said quietly. My head's not as sharp lately. It's okay, Dad, she said. The voice people use on children. Tuesday with Doctor. Ellison will sort it out. I nodded, weak smile. Sure, I guess. Travis stood and checked his watch. We need to pick up some things for the wedding, get some rest. Okay. Yeah, I'm tired. I'll head upstairs, I said. When they left, I watched through the window. His gray SUV rolled slowly down the street. I sat still until the engine sound faded, then took out my phone and stopped the recording. The screen showed nearly 1 hour and 37 minutes. I plugged in the cable, hooked it to my laptop, and backed up the audio to an external drive and a tiny memory card I hid in the hem of my gray vest. The file was crystal clear. Fiona saying, Dr. Ellison, Travis saying a few witnesses saying he forgets. Every line, every word a drill bit, pushing through the calm shell I tried to keep. I sat back and looked around the room. Family photos, the wooden wall clock, the 2018 Company Award, now all witnesses to a tragedy I never thought I'd see. Before heading upstairs, I wrote a few short lines in my notebook. June 19th. Fiona confirms Dr. Ellison appointment 2 days after the wedding. Travis mentions witnesses just say he forgets. Recording successful memory card, hidden hem of gray vest. I closed the notebook and set it carefully in a drawer. When I locked my office door, the click sounded dry and final, but inside I felt lighter. My performance was complete. I stood in front of the mirror and looked at the silver-haired man with a slight stoop and steel still glinting under the fatigue. In that glass, I wasn't the confused old man they imagined. I was a father ready for the last fight. I turned off the light and headed for the stairs. Downstairs lay dim, only a warm glow from the living room climbing up. The clock beat steadily, each tick a reminder. Don't rush. Hold the roll. That night I lay listening to rain on the roof. No more shaking inside. I knew in just a few days the ones who thought they were in control would learn they'd written their own indictment in their own voices. The morning after the recording, I woke earlier than usual. Oregon summer light streamed through the blinds and onto the big hall mirror. The man in the mirror was still me, Harold Benton, 70 silver hair, with a golden cast, but there was no hesitation left in those eyes. After years working with steel, I know this. Before load testing a bridge, an engineer makes sure the foundation is solid to the last inch, and the wedding coming up would be the final stress test of my life. I brewed a strong coffee, opened my notebook, and marked a new line. Counterplan goal. Expose the truth at the wedding. Under it, I started listing the steps. The first step was sound. I remembered the pavilion's old speakers fine for background music, and the MC not for what I needed. I needed everyone in the hall from the front table to the exit doors to hear every word I said and every line they confessed. I opened my contacts and called Summit Audio and Lighting, the company that handled sound for our plant opening last year. A young male voice came on, cheerful but professional. Hi, Mr. Benton, long time, got another project. I want to rent a full hall coverage setup for a family event. I said, slowly choosing every word. At least 8 wireless mics, 2 mixers, and a distributed speaker array that can broadcast simultaneously from multiple points. Why do you need that much power for the event, sir? I just want to make sure everyone can hear the truth. I smiled, voice cool but calm. Send the quote. Don't worry about saving me money. Yes, Mr. Benton, we'll set up a conference-grade system to cover the entire hall. Good. Install it Saturday morning before the wedding. I want to test it before guests arrive. I hung up and added a note. Summit Audio 8 mics plus mixer test before 10 a.m. Second step the audience. A performance only matters if there are witnesses. I wasn't planning to make a scene for revenge. I wanted the truth to ring out in the most public place in front of the people who thought I was old and confused. I opened my old contacts and called every relative Fiona had slowly pushed away over the years. Hey Dan, long time no see. My daughter's wedding is this week at the Willow Pavilion. You and your wife free. It's been too long since the family got together. We thought you weren't doing anything big. Well, change of plans. I want a fuller house. Call it a chance to look back as a family. I said it in the warmest voice I could. In 1 week, I called nearly 35 relatives Fiona had once labeled too busy to invite. Now they were happy to come. Some sounded moved that Uncle Harold still remembered. I ended the last call near noon and looked at the guest list filling 2 full pages. Every name was a potential witness for the show my daughter would never forget. In the afternoon, I reached out to Maya Rudd. She'd sent her full report, and I needed more. Maya, I said, I want you to collect everything that proves their financial motive. Photos, emails, gambling, receipts, any link between Travis and Dr. Ellison. I want it all verified. Where are you planning to use this? She asked, a hint of worry in her voice. In the last place anyone expects, I said, treat this like a public case. Understood. I'll bring color printouts and a backup drive. But Mr. Benton, if you're going to do what I think you need to be airtight, not just on evidence, but legally. I chuckled. Exactly. I'm on my way to see an attorney. Attorney Evelyn Carter's office sits in a red brick building near Pioneer Square. Evelyn is blunt, helped me once in a land fight with the city, and most important, has no ties to Knox. When I laid everything out, she was quiet for a long time, taking the occasional note. Finally, Evelyn said, you have 2 options. Fight in the shadows or take it public so it can't be twisted. I think you've already chosen the second. That's right, I said. I'm protecting my name and the company. We reviewed the paperwork. Evelyn drafted a new will addendum on the spot. If any individual knowingly or fraudulently attempts to have owner Harold Benton declared incapacitated, all assets transferred directly to the Oregon Children's Fund, voiding any inheritance. I signed it, my hand steady, as when I inked my first contract. Evelyn looked at me with a mix of respect and concern. You know, plenty of younger folks don't have the guts to defend themselves like this. I'm doing what I always do. Check the foundation before the wind rises. Leaving her office, I felt a strange calm. Everything was lining up step by step like a well-designed build plan. That evening, in my study, the desk lamp poured over a thick stack of files. I began moving the key Benton aggregate shares into a temporary protective trust, releasable only with 2 independent signatures, Evelyn's and my former chief accountant, Martin Hughes. The entire process was notarized, filed electronically, and stored in 3 places. I updated the company finance passwords and switched all security to 2-factor authentication. One more step. I set up automatic access log so any login attempt would capture an IP address and ping me. If Fiona or Travis tried to get in, I'd know. I did each step slowly and carefully, like pouring the final layers of a bridge, footing, named Justice. On Friday, I went to Draper & Sons, the tour I've used for 20 years. The owner, older than me by a few years, squinted and smiled when I walked in. Been a while, Harold. Big occasion? I need a new suit light gray, with an inside pocket sealed tight. He raised an eyebrow but didn't ask. Easy. Pen or wallet documents, I said. Flat. Just make sure no one can tell it's there. 3 days later, I'd pick up the suit. Fine, stitching, soft fabric, and a reinforced inner pocket cut to fit a memory card and hard copies of key documents. Everything would be ready. The last night before the wedding, I sat on the porch watching the street lamp glow over an empty road. The air carried a damp hint of the Columbia River. I poured a little bourbon and sipped. In my head, I rehearsed the ceremony order. 1 opening a toast and a few thanks. 2 midway lay out the evidence, Maya's documents and photos. 3 then play the recording. Let them convict themselves. Closing. Announce the will addendum and legal actions. Everything would be captured clearly through the mic system I'd rented. No one could deny it. I leaned back and looked up. Through thin clouds, the new moon's edge flashed like a blade. Barbara used to say, "You plan like life is a half-finished build." Maybe she was right, and the last thing I'd ever build would be a fair fight for myself. I closed the notebook, folded the plan, and tucked it into the new suit pocket. At the bottom of the page, I added 1 more line in black ink. The wedding day will be the day we lift the manhole cover. Let the light shine on what they've hidden. Then I blew out the lamp, stood up, and felt my heartbeat steady. A week ago, I was an old man under threat of losing my freedom. Now, I'm the one building the stage they'll step onto then fall from. I was in my study when the wall clock hit 1000 p.m. Outside the window, Portland lay under a film of rain like smoke. Water drummed on the old metal roof, making the house both warm and lonesome. On the desk sat a thick stack, the speech I'd edited for 2 days. Every word and period were pieces of my life and the wound I was about to lay bare. I read it from the top, quiet but clear. The original opener had been bitter. When the child you raised on sweat and trust chooses to sell her father for comfort, I crossed it out. I rewrote. Sometimes we build houses so strong we forget to teach our children how to keep their own foundations. Tomorrow, I didn't want them to see an angry old man. I wanted them to see a father choosing truth over vengeance. I didn't need applause. I needed silence. The kind that comes with waking up. I read it again, trimmed the barbs, and tuned the tone to be light as air but sharp enough to cut through fake walls. Each pass, I could hear Barbara. Don't use pain to teach. Let the truth do it. When I folded the last page, my hands shook a little, not from fear, but from knowing there'd be no turning back in the morning. I moved to the safety check's old engineer habit. 3 small items sat in a straight line. A silver USB with a tamper seal, a black external drive, and the gray suit with the inner pocket holding a micro SD card. Each one a layer of protection, a layer of footing for tomorrow's plan. I opened the computer and checked the secure cloud. 3 folders named Site A Evidence, Site B Audio, Site C Legal. All showed sync successfully. I opened files at random. The recording of Fiona mentioning Dr. Ellis and Maya's images, the newly signed will addendum with Evelyn all intact. Then I opened the sealed USB and compared checksums matched down to the byte. Last I opened the memory card and listened to a 30-second clip. Fiona's voice bright but icy. A few witnesses saying he forgets. And that's it. I stopped it and drew a long breath. The girl who once called me her superhero at 10 now sounded like a strategist. I shut the laptop, resealed the USB, and carefully packed everything into the leather bag. No room for error. I checked each layer like rebar before a pour, and if this build collapsed, it would do so on my terms. Near midnight, I called Victor. He picked up after 2 rings, voice rough and tired. I'm guessing you're not sleeping, I said. Nope, can't. He chuckled softly, guilt buried in it. Tomorrow I want you at the wedding, I said. Steady back row. Don't intervene. Just be a witness. Victor paused. I'll be there. Need me to say anything? No, just watch. And if it all goes the way I've planned, you'll confirm I was never out of my mind. He sighed. Harold, I owe you the truth. If I hadn't betrayed you back then, maybe you wouldn't be fighting alone now. I don't blame you, I said. People lose themselves when they trust the wrong person. Me included. Silence held a moment. Then he whispered, I'll be there. Back of the hall, like you said. The call ended in the black screen. My face looked back, tired but clear. I saw the years with Victor again. 2 young men pouring concrete in the rain to set Benton's first foundation. Maybe he does owe me, but the biggest debt now is the one I owe myself. One time without fear. I slid open a drawer and took out an old stack of photos. On top was me and Fiona in front of the beat-up mixer truck. She was 10 ponytail hands, dusty, with cement grinning. I remember Barbara behind the camera laughing. Look at you two all dusted up and smiling like you won a prize. I brushed a thumb over that little face. When did love warp into arithmetic? When did a child start seeing her father as a number, not a person? Maybe that's on me. I taught her to build a house, but not to guard her heart. A gust rattled the window and I shivered. I set the photo back in its frame, opened the small notebook, the counterplan ledger, and wrote on the last page, if things go too far tomorrow, let Fiona read this. I pulled a clean sheet and wrote by hand. Fiona, I'm not writing to blame you. I just want you to remember when you learned to ride your bike. You fell 3 times and I was never angry because I knew you have to fall a few times to stand strong. If you fall tomorrow, I will still forgive you. You're my flesh and blood. I only regret one thing. You chose the wrong road to get what you want. And if you realize you're lost, this house is open. If you walk back on honest feet, I don't need money or glory. I just need to know my daughter still has some light in her heart. If you're reading this, it means things broke, but even then I believe foundations can be fixed. Straightened the footing, and the house stands kiddo, your dad, Harold Benton. When I finished, I folded it carefully, sealed it with red wax, and set it on the desk beneath that old photo. I don't know if she'll ever read it, but at least I won't leave words unsaid. The clock hit 12:30. I set an alarm for 5:30 a.m., then stood and did box breathing, 4 seconds in 4, hold 4 out. A doctor taught me after my 2019 heart scare. Tonight it did more. It kept my head clear. Each breath was a slow, steady knock of resolve. I leaned on the wall, taking in the room, the shelves, the desk, the smell of oak. Barbara used to call it the heart of the house. I smiled and repeated a job site line I used to tell the crew when we checked slab level. Straight foundation, standing house. It pushed back the fear of loneliness, the empty that waited after tomorrow. I'd done the right thing. No matter what happened at dawn, I'd be standing straight. I killed the lights, leaving only the night lamp glowing on the ceiling. My shadow stretched long like a man stepping out of a net age, and fear no longer holding him. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city lay still, holding its breath. I got into bed, pulled the blanket up. Sleep came slow, thin, as a page turning in a draft. Right before the dark took me, I thought of Barbara, of Fiona, of all that would break and be rebuilt after sunrise. Tomorrow the light would show everything, and the truth would speak for itself. I reached the Willamette Lakeside Pavilion at 6 a.m. As the sun crept up behind the riverside trees, the air still held a cool fog, the damp wood mixing with fresh flower scent from the decorators. The hall, nearly 300 square meters, was silent except for cartwheels squeaking. A white welcome to the wedding of Fiona and Travis sign leaned in the breeze. I paused to touch its edge, a reminder that today the stage wasn't only theirs. Inside the Summit audio techs were finishing the rig. Cables ran clean along the floor into each corner hidden under the blue carpet. I walked over, greeted them, and said, "Give me one last check. I want anyone who speaks to be heard everywhere, right to the back tables." The young tech with headphones around his neck nodded. "You're good, Mr. Benton." We've installed 8 wireless mics, 4 transmit stations, redundant signal paths to prevent interference. If you want to play audio from a phone or laptop, just plug into this auxiliary port. I looked at the small silver jack like it was the key to the whole show. So anything from my phone, press play, and it goes to the whole hall. Exactly, sir. We tested it very clear. I nodded. Good. Let me try. I stepped to the lectern, pulled my phone, and ran a test clip. Hello. The sound rolled across the hall, clear and bell-like. I smiled. Every sentence I spoke, every voice they uttered would carry everywhere. No cutting, no twisting. Want us to tweak the reverb? The tech asked. It's fine. Leave it. I walked the room, glanced up at the high ceiling where the chandeliers scattered the morning light. Everything gleamed, but inside I felt steady like a man erecting scaffolding before a pour. Not to wreck anything, but to rebuild something fairer. By round 8, the servers started dressing to the tables. I checked the extended family section front rows for the relatives I'd added. I wanted them close so they wouldn't miss a thing. While I was adjusting name cards, a cheerful voice bubbled behind me. "Great to see you, Uncle Harold." I turned. Chloe, my cousin's daughter from Texas, ran up and hugged me, hair carrying a hint of rose. "It's been forever," Mom said. "You're doing great, but I didn't expect you to drive yourself." I laughed and patted her shoulder. "Still good, kiddo." "Thanks for coming. Come on, it's Fiona's wedding." She beamed, then dropped her voice. "Everyone says you must be so proud." I just nodded. "I am. But today I've got something a little more important." She looked curious, but I tapped her shoulder and shifted to talking about flowers. She didn't know her presence and dozens of others would be a thick layer of witnesses for a truth Fiona never saw coming. Around 9, Travis showed dark blue suit, shiny silver collar. Pinna walked so confident it bled arrogance. I watched him pumping hands and booming. My father-in-law's company is entering a new era. I'm going to optimize the whole operation and move to automation. Time for Benton aggregates to go next, Jen, right? I stood a few steps away and smiled faintly. Every time he said my father-in-law, there wasn't a drop of respect, just a useful title. I didn't interrupt, I observed. He had no idea the key shares were already in a safety trust. His optimization now was a house on sand. 10:30, Fiona walked in. I froze. In a white square neck dress, she truly looked like an angel. Soft waves in her hair, pale pink lips. The light on her smooth skin made the whole hall go quiet for a few seconds. I heard someone whisper, "She's stunning." I still called her Little Fee in my head, the kid who used to sit next to me in the truck, singing along to the radio while we hauled concrete. Now she stood there proud, distant. I didn't know if there was any part of her heart that still remembered the father who carried her through a winter fever. Fiona saw me and smiled. "Dad, you're early." "Old construction habit, kid?" I answered steady. "Never show up late when it's a big job." "Don't worry about a thing," she said lightly, squeezing my hand. "We'll take care of everything after today. You just sit and relax." I nodded, searching her eyes for a trace of the old light. All I saw was calm calculation, the look of someone who'd already scripted the scene. After Fiona and Travis got busy with photos, I went back to the tech crew. Final check, signal solid. The tech gave a thumbs up, solid 100%. Wireless mics are smooth. The AX input from a phone is tested, no latency. You just hit play, and the sound goes everywhere. Good. I tested once more. Good afternoon, everyone. The sound was clear, warm, and clean. My voice seemed lifted by the air reaching every corner. Hearing it like that made me strangely calm. I carefully set the document bag under the lectern inside. Printed copies of Maya's report photos of Travis's gambling debts, the complaint against Dr. Ellison for falsifying records, and a backup memory card with the recording. I ran a short test recording to check the signal, then played it back crystal clear down to each breath. Perfect! I stepped out to the terrace and looked at the will glittering in the sun. The water curved around the bend, reflecting the blue sky and a few sails in the distance. I thought if anything can wash away lies and rot, it's this river. It doesn't take sides, it just flows, carries off the trash and leaves the silt. I hope this ceremony would do the same. Take the rot. Leave the truth. Near noon, the MC found me. Brown hair crisp, shirt voice, soft, like a radio host. Mr. Venton, we need to lock the speaking order. Where would you like your remarks? You can open the dinner or go after the ring ceremony. I thought for a few seconds. After dessert, I said he nodded. So right before the dancing. Perfect. I'll tell the techs to hold a mic for you. I thanked him and went back to my table. Just then my phone buzzed text from Maya. All evidence is ready. If needed, give the signal, and I'll push files to the Portland Herald and the local news channel. I read it and replied briefly. Wait until I'm done speaking. When they react, send, she replied with a thumbs up. I slipped the phone into my pocket and tightened my grip. A steady warmth spread through my hand. I had everything set. Stage witnesses, audio evidence, even an exit. Every small detail in its place like a perfect build sheet. I looked over the hall one more time. The smell of flowers, pastry, and freshly popped champagne mingled in the air. Across the room, Fiona laughed brightly in Travis's arms. They didn't know that with every passing minute, the stage was tightening around them. I exhaled and whispered, All right, Barbara, the footing is true. Now we wait for the hammer. And as the noon light poured through the glass, I knew the Willamette Lakeside Pavilion wasn't just a wedding venue. It was where the truth would be rebuilt. The first brick laid by my own voice. That afternoon sunlight streamed through the pavilion's high glass and fell across the white runner to the stage. Soft piano notes drifted around the clink of glasses and easy laughter. Everyone believed it was a day for flowers, for love, for forever. I knew it was the day the truth would start speaking. When the MC announced the father of the bride, the whole hall applauded. Fiona looked at me with a gentle smile, probably expecting a few tender lines about my daughter in marriage. I walked to the lectern, one hand on the mic, the other resting on the suit pocket holding my phone. The applause faded. I looked around close to 200 people, family friends, colleagues, and the relatives I'd invited as witnesses. Eyes lifted, expecting a kind father's words. I smiled, voice slow, warm, and low. Thank you all for being here today. I've worked construction for over 40 years. To me, the most important part of any build isn't the steel or the concrete, it's trust. That's what keeps every foundation standing. Trust is like the slab underneath. You don't see it, but if it cracks, the whole building goes down. A few soft laughs. I paused and looked at Fiona. Today I'm not only talking about marriage. I want to talk about the truth. I said those 4 words slowly and clearly. No one laughed now. The air tightened. The MC looked up, brow creasing. I went on, the truth is the footing I believe has been drilled through in this very house. I'm not here to wreck a wedding. I'm here to rebuild a cracked foundation with my own voice. I took the phone from my pocket, plugged it into the system. A small click. Every speaker lit green. I glanced at the tech in the corner. He nodded. I took a breath and hit play. Travis's voice filled the room as if he stood in the center of it. The old man doesn't get it anymore. Sell and be done. Once I hold the shares, I'll transfer the company to a new name. As soon as Fiona files for guardianship, it's all legal. A wave of shock rose from the left tables. Someone dropped a glass. I stood still and watched the crowd. Breathing across the hall turned tight and quick. I tapped again. Fiona's voice came on soft, but knife cold. A few witnesses saying, "Dad forgets, and that's it. Ellison is ready to sign." After that, Travis handles the company. An older woman in the family section lurched to her feet, hand over her mouth. "Oh God, Fiona," she whispered. Fiona stood frozen, eyes-wide fists clutching the white dress. Travis turned toward her, purple, with rage, mouth working, but no sound. I cut the audio and let the silence press down. Then I spoke. Even that's the voice of two people I once called family. Two people who worked with attorney Randall Knox and Dr. Ellison to prepare guardianship papers to strip me of my rights. They call it legal care. I call it betrayal. I pulled a packet from my pocket and held it up. Light flashed on the clear cover. "This," I said, "is a photocopy from Knox's office with a note. Expedite if there's an agitation incident after the reception." I flipped a page, and this is the appointment with Dr. Ellison, who agreed to provide a capacity letter listed contact name Travis Cole. The whispers swelled. Some guests stood, some raised their phones to record. Fiona trembled, face bleached white. It's bleached. I set the file down and opened another Maya's investigation. "And this," I said, slow, "is proof that Travis owes over $120,000 in gambling debt, and that Dr. Ellison, the man hired to confirm my memory issues, is under investigation for falsifying patient records." Travis yelled. "That's a lie. You have no right. Enough, Travis." My voice was firm, steel, cold, not loud but everywhere through the speakers. I'm not speaking from anger. I'm speaking from evidence. I held up the last sheet, the will addendum. And here's what I signed 3 days ago. If anyone, including family, fraudulently attempts to have me declared incapacitated, all my assets, shares, and property transfer directly to the Oregon Children's Fund. The room broke into a low roar. Someone in the back row blurted, "Good Lord." I looked straight at Fiona. "Kid," I said, voice tight. "I'm not confused. I'm just hurt. Hurt that the one person I trusted chose the other side, but the truth still has to be spoken." A tear slid down my cheek and I didn't wipe it. I wanted them to see this pain wasn't theater. The hall went dead quiet except for the river beyond the windows and a draft slipping through the curtains. Fiona crumpled into a chair, head in her hand. Travis tried to step forward, but 2 cousins held him back. A few women began to cry. Someone squeezed my hand hard as I stepped down. I didn't leave the stage right away. I looked around, faces, shocked faces, aching. Fiona's bright wedding hall had turned into a court without a judge where the evidence read itself in their own voices. The warm golden lights now felt like investigatory lamps catching every twitch. I heard someone whisper, "Unbelievable, his own daughter." I set the mic down and bowed my head. Thank you for listening. I'm sorry this warped the celebration, but truth doesn't pick a pretty time to show up. It shows up when someone is finally brave enough. A thin ripple of applause began, then grew not cheerleading, but respect. I walked past Fiona. She looked up, mascara, smudged lips shaking. "Dad, I didn't," I said softly. "If there's any truth left in you, hold on to it. Everything else, let the wind and water carry it away." I turned and walked out. Behind me, the noise rose. Voices might clatter, crying. I heard only one sound, the Willamette's steady flow, as if rinsing off whatever lies still clung. On the steps outside, the late sun touched my hands. I tightened my grip on the will addendum in my pocket, feeling the fibers, the fresh ink. I whispered, "Barbara, you see this?" I held the footing. And in the breeze, I could almost hear her answer, soft as breath on the water, straight foundation standing house. The murmurs inside hadn't settled when Travis suddenly roared and slammed his hand on a banquet table, spilling wine across the white cloth. "You made this up. You're insane. You staged this to ruin your daughter's wedding." His voice was raw, his face flared red. He knocked a chair over, pointed at me, his suit lapels trembling. The crash rang through the hall like a sledgehammer on concrete. The MC hurried up, trying to soothe. "Please, everyone, let's keep calm." "This is a Travis," shoved him aside. "Shut up. This is a setup. That old man, he's not sane." I stood still. No need to shout, no rebuttal. I've watched builds shiver before they fail. When the rebar is pulled from the footing, one tremor and the slab splits. Travis was the first crack. Two security staff prompted by the MC moved in. One short, stocky spoke low but firm. "Sir, either calm down or step outside to breathe." Travis shook him off, then saw dozens of phone cameras aimed at him and the crowd's disgust. He froze. Fiona stayed seated, hands over her face, mascara streaking black down her cheeks. Then, like the last strand snapping, she broke into sobs and dropped to her knees in the aisle scattered with white petals. I didn't mean harm, Dad," she stammered. "I was scared you'd be alone. I didn't want you lost without care." I looked at my daughter, not the grown woman in an expensive dress, but the 10-year-old shaking by the mixer truck, afraid of being left behind. Maybe right now she truly believes she'd done it for me. But love cut with ambition is like concrete mixed with salt water. It fails no matter how much sand and rock you pour in. I stepped over and placed the handwritten letter I drafted last night in front of her. "I prepared this in case you choose to turn back," I said, low and even. "You still have a way out, Fiona, but only if you choose the truth." She touched the red wax seal with trembling fingers. Her lips moved, but tears swallowed the words. I turned to Travis, voice flat and cool as fresh steel. "You have 48 hours to clear out of my house. That home was built by my hands, and Barbara's not by anyone's lies. If you cross that threshold again, the police and the courts can do their jobs." He started to retort, then shut his mouth under the weight of the room. A security guard set a hand on his shoulder, gentle but firm. I went back to the lectern and hit speakerphone. My voice carried through the room. "Attorney Evelyn Carter is on the line." Her voice came clear and professional. "I confirm the will addendum and Mr. Harold Benton's protective trust were duly notarized and filed with the Multnomah County Court in Oregon. All transfers, including the clause triggered by fraudulent actions, are sealed." I thanked her and ended the call. The murmurs rose again now with approval. A man in the third row, Dan, my cousin, who sat with Barbara in the hospital at the end, spoke up. "Harold, you did right. No one gets to walk over the person who gave them everything." Another woman, Marjorie, Barbara's friend, stood voice-breaking. "Good Lord, Fiona, your mother was so proud of you. How did you let this happen?" Fiona bowed her head. Tears fell onto her white dress. Travis shrank under the stairs, hands limp at his sides. I signaled the MC, "Cut the music and bring up all the lights." A second later, bright white flooded the hall, showing every face, every twitch. The string quartet faded into raw silence. No more wedding, no more love stage, only the truth. Standing in the center, I looked around and spoke into the mic. "Thank you for coming. We're not attending a wedding now. We're attending a waking. If you want to stay and help my daughter find herself again, thank you. If you want to leave, the door's open." My voice was so calm it surprised me. Maybe because I'd cried out inside for years. Today the tears had hardened into steel. At the back, Victor stepped from the shadows. Blue shirt, dark jacket, steady face. When our eyes met, he just nodded. No words needed. The debt between two men was paid. He'd warned me. Helped me keep my name before it got buried. I nodded back, Nothing more to say. I left the hall in silence. Each footfall smacked dryly on the marble. Behind me, chaos. Someone sobbing, Travis sputtering, security murmuring into radios. I didn't look back. I've stood in a collapsing structure. When the footing's cracked, the only job left is to walk out. Outside, late sun poured gold over the will. White wedding petals spun in the wind and fell on the steps like ash. I stopped, slipped off my tie, folded it into my pocket. In my hands were only the gray suit hiding the memory card and papers and the small Tiffany box I'd once meant for Fiona. I studied the gift one last time. In the light, the blue ribbon flashed like a father's final thread of hope for a child who'd lost her way. I smiled and said to myself, "You can still come home, Fiona. A footing can crack, but if you mix it right, it will stand." I turned toward the parking lot. Whispering followed gossip, sniffles, phones recording. I felt no anger, no shame, only lightness, like I'd lifted tons of concrete off my chest. At the car, I looked back at the glowing building. Through the glass, Fiona still knelt, head bowed to the floor. I didn't know if it was regret or fear, but I knew this. Today she saw the father she thought was weak, still standing same as ever. I started the engine, my hand resting on the Tiffany box. Sunlight scattered on the water like 1,000 mirrors reflecting old memories. I said quietly, "Barbara, rest easy. The house still stands. And the one keeping the footing hasn't fallen." Then I drove away from the Wampt Lakeside Pavilion with only two things: the gray suit and an ungiven gift, leaving behind a broken wedding, a fallen family, and an old man who'd found his straight line again. That night, Portland felt damp and cold, like the whole city shared my invisible fatigue. A misting rain threw yellow streetlight back from the wet pavement. I drove over Tillicum, crossing the Wamut, below Black and Quiet, a few scattered reflections flickering. My hand stayed tight on the wheel, the suit draped on the passenger seat, the Tiffany box resting in the door pocket. The wind slipped cold through the window seams, the smell of rain mixed with damp metal, taking me back to those late night shifts on the job site. Back then, Barbara and I would meet at the end of the bridge, share coffee in the old truck, and talk about small dreams. Now I was crossing that same bridge alone, only this time no one was waiting for me on the other side. I flipped on the headlights and turned south down the road to the Woodhouse in the suburbs. When I pulled in, the clock read 11 p.m. The house was dark, just a small porch light spilling across the wet steps. I unlocked the door and went in total silence. No Fiona calling out, no Travis rummaging in the fridge, no cheap perfume hanging in the hallway, only the smell of damp wood and the slow, steady beat of the wall clock. I walked a loop through the house, checked every window and lock. All of it had been replaced fingerprint locks. The security camera system Victor helped me install the day before. Every corner now had a small eye watching quietly, like I was learning to trust tech instead of people. I sat at the dining table and opened my laptop. In my inbox was an email from Maya, sent at 8:00 p.m. "Mr. Benton, you should know the FBI just made Dr. Ellison's investigation public. Part of his statement matches the audio I sent. The Portland Herald and Channel 6 want to interview you in the morning. I'll wait for your call." I read it slowly, line by line, then exhaled. I typed back short, "Thank you, Maya. I don't want to engage with the media. I'm not out for revenge. I'm protecting my foundation. Stay safe. Send. Done." I shut the computer and sat still in the dark. The yellow lamp lighting the water glass in front of me. Tiny bubbles rose and burst, just like how a family can pop apart because of a crack too small for anyone to bother patching. I went down to the garage. The old concrete mixer still sat there under a thick layer of dust. I set my hand on the metal steering wheel. My palm touched a cold strip of rust. That machine had been with me nearly 30 years, from the day I started out to when Fiona was a little kid, begging to sit in the tall seat and drive with Dad. I remembered that day clear as glass. Barbara yelled, Don't let her near that thing again, Harold? And Fiona laughed tiny hands on the wheel. Daddy, I'll drive with you. I promise I won't push any buttons. I smiled, tears sneaking out before I noticed. I whispered, Little Fee, in my heart, you're still 10. The woman from yesterday that was just someone wearing your face. I pulled the key, turned it in the ignition. The engine shuddered, then cut mixer officially retired. I closed the cover, pulled the tarp over it, and called that era done. The next morning, thin sunlight slipped through the window across the table where I kept Barbara's photo. I touched the frame and smiled. Honey, I did it. Then I opened a notebook and began planning a scholarship for young engineers under the name Barbara Benton Foundation, made for construction students with financial hardship. I wrote the first line. This is our real legacy, something that won't be sold, scammed, or manipulated, something poured with kindness. Relief came in a strange light wave. I felt like Barbara was sitting beside me. Snorts, a hand on my shoulder, her voice soft. You picked the right material, Harold, the kind that doesn't crack. By late afternoon, I bought a train ticket to the coast at Lincoln City. Not far, just a little over 2 hours. But for me, it felt like the first trip after years trapped in worry. I promised myself one day with no phone calls, no questions, no blame, just wind, the ocean, and an old man learning to befriend the empty space. Before leaving the house, I wrote a short letter to Victor. Victor, thank you for telling the truth when I needed it most. Without that call that night, I might have been buried alive at my own daughter's wedding. I'm enclosing a Starbucks card, just enough for 2 cappuccinos. One for you and one for me if we meet again someday. Call our debt even, Harold. I sealed it and dropped it in the corner mailbox. As it slid through the slot, I heard a small rasp like the sound of a chapter closing. That evening, I sat on the wooden porch chair, river wind running cool. The city eased into its lights. Far off, a car horn, and the hush of air moving through the trees. On the table, a cup of coffee steamed, the bitter smell threading through the damp air. I looked at the house, empty, but safe. No shoes tossed around, no TV droning all night, no slick little jabs from Travis. Everything was so clean, I could hear my own breathing. But the silence didn't make me lonely like I'd expected. It just reminded me, truth always leaves a space. When lies get swept away, you see the bare slab underneath, and you have to learn to live there, not stuff it with illusions. I spoke to myself, low and steady, straight foundation standing house. I took a sip. The heat spread through my throat. In my mind, the Tecum Bridge, the nightlights, and the quiet will came back. Everything passes, pain and emptiness too. But one thing I know, the build called a life isn't finished yet. I closed my eyes and listened to wind, to water, and to the stillness wrapping around me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel left behind. I felt like I was starting over. A week after the wrecked wedding, Portland went back to its usual rhythm. Rain, fog, and quiet walkers on the bridges. I was sitting in a small cafe by the river when my phone buzzed. It was Fiona. Just one short line. Dad, can I meet you alone? Travis won't be there. I looked at it for a long time. No anger, no hope. Just the tired need to face it, like checking a footing after an earthquake. I texted back. Tomorrow afternoon, the old cafe by the Will. The next day, a light rain fell. The cafe was nearly empty, rain tapping on the window frame. I sat at our usual corner table, 2 cappuccinos in front of me. The door opened and Fiona walked in. She wasn't a bride in white anymore, just a worn-out woman with puffy eyes gripping a wet umbrella. I knew you'd come, she said, voice thin. I only nodded. We sat across from each other a long time, the rain speaking for us. Then Fiona broke down, crying like a child. Dad, I got led by someone else's ambition. I thought I was in control, but I was being used. I'm sorry. Her tears fell onto the table, blending into a spilled coffee ring like the stain of the past. I looked at my daughter, wanted to pull her in, but stopped. Not because I wouldn't forgive, but because forgiveness shouldn't be a free gift. I took a breath and spoke slowly. I don't need an apology, Fiona. I need action. If you truly want to restart, there are three things. One, therapy to understand why you chose deceit over conversation. Two, sign a legal commitment confirming you fully relinquish any control over my assets and company. Three, return what you and Travis pulled from the family fund, not for the money, for fairness. Fiona looked at me, tears sliding. Do you really think I can do it? I don't know. I said, still in the voice of an old father. But I believe anyone can mix a new batch if they're willing to clear out the old. She went quiet a long time, then nodded. 2 days later at the attorney's office, Fiona showed up with Evelyn. She signed every document, agreed to repay the money, and committed to work with an independent counselor. I watched my daughter's shaky signature on paper. It looked just like Barbara's when she signed our first contract years ago. When it was done, I didn't wish her luck or say, we're back to how we were. I just handed Fiona a chance to start over. Not money, not a house, just the chance to live honestly. After that, I converted Benton aggregates and concrete to an ESOP and employee ownership plan. I've always believed a true footing isn't one person at the top. It's dozens of honest hands lifting together. The day I signed the documents, the old hands who'd worked with me since Barbara's time were there. They clapped my shoulder and laughed. Mr. Benton, the company belongs to all of us now, I said. That's right. And when ownership is shared, trust is harder to steal. 3 months later, I stood on a small stage at the first scholarship ceremony for young engineers under the Barbara Benton Foundation. Dozens of students in work vests stood below eyes, bright plans in hand. I told them the story I once told at Fiona's wedding, but this time no one cried. I've said trust is the cement of every footing I began. Without it, any building falls, no matter how strong the concrete, and trust doesn't just build houses, it builds people. Gentle applause. A student asked, Sir, if the old footing is cracked, can we rebuild? I smiled. Yes, but before you pour a new batch, you've got to clear the cracked part. And sometimes that cracked part is inside us. The room went quiet. I looked to the guest seats. Fiona sat in the back row, quiet, no makeup, a thin silver ring on her finger. When I glanced her way, she gave a small nod. That evening at home, I opened the glass cabinet. In the center, I set the diamond earrings in the Tiffany box, the gift I'd meant to give at the wedding. Now they rested behind glass under a small plate I'd had engraved. Every lie has a price. Sometimes that price is someone you once loved most. Late light hit the box, throwing tiny sparks like 2 tears turned to stone. I looked at them and didn't feel pain anymore, just lightness. Outside, the will moved in silence, carrying the last of the day's glow. I leaned on the rail and listened to the wind in the leaves. I understood then that victory can feel hollow. No one beside you to share it, but it's necessary. Without it, the footing stays cracked and no one dares fix it. I said to myself a closing line, Barbara, you see the walls are skimmed again? And this new footing is strong enough for whoever comes next. Thank you for walking with me to the end of this story. Maybe each of us has lost something, a person, a belief, or just the sense of safety in our own home. I don't know where you are or what you're facing, but if my story reminded you of a footing that once cracked in your life, please believe it can be rebuilt. Tell me where you're from and what you would do in my place. I truly want to hear it because your thoughts and comments are the cement that keeps this bridge between storyteller and listener standing. If this story felt worth keeping, please leave a comment and subscribe so we can meet again in the journeys ahead, where every crack, every loss can become the footing for something better. I'm grateful you stayed to the end quietly listening. Thank you for believing that in a changing world, honesty is still the toughest material we have to build a life.